Here's your buddy Kevin from No Treble, hanging out with the fretless bass wizards, Steve DiGiorgio and Jeroen Paul Thesseling. Guys, thanks so much for taking the time to chit chat about the new Quadvium album.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I know we're on a big time difference, so we were just working that math out before you hopped on, Steve. So um, I wanted to start out, No Treble, obviously a site for bass players, and so we like to geek out about bass stuff. What is I want to know like your fretless bass origin stories, which I know you've probably told before, but to see maybe how you guys separately came to the fretless and what keeps you interested in the fretless.
Yeah. um, well, the thing we have in common is we both started pretty young on fretless instruments, and also in common was not bass guitar. Um, I started on the lower end of the orchestra playing upright bass in school for a very brief time. I went through a lot of the other instruments when I was really, really young. Just just filling my schedule with band classes, just to avoid, shop class and PE and stuff like that. So I was playing bass clarinet and baritone horn, bass trombone, tuba. And so just jumping around like that and mixing all my instruments up, I realized that there was an extra bass in the orchestra class. So the music teacher let me transfer in and take a beginner book in the practice room, and I taught myself for about a quarter and then joined the class for the other quarter, and that's about it. But that instrument is fretless in nature, just like cello, viola, violin, and stuff. And yeah, and one of the other bass players in the class brought his Fender in, and uh, that was the first time I played an electric bass guitar, and I knew it was for me. And so it was only a matter of short time until I was able to convert my original Fender copy bass into fretless, and that's kind of the one that put me on the map. This bastard Frankenstein instrument that I made myself. That's the one you hear on Autopsy, Death, and stuff like that. Um, yeah, so probably late '80s. Um, didn't have any major influences back at that time. Um, I had heard Tony Franklin with Blue Murder, and there's one Jethro Tull out from 1980, bass player named Dave Pegg, who did a crazy job. That kind of stuff got me in there. I'm a latecomer to Jocko, and eventually found Mick Karn and Gary Willis and guys like this. And then that led me right to an album called Spears, where I met my favorite bass player in the world, who's on fretless. So go ahead, Jeroen, you take it.
Yeah, that's actually sort of the same background. Um, yeah, I also started in classical music, violin, young age, 7, um, and ran through like a lot of classical stuff, like a lot of Baroque, Vivaldi, Bach, um, playing in ensembles and Baroque ensemble, playing in a string orchestra. Yeah, it was actually on a weekly basis, like very intensive stuff, like to do. It was like a to-do list for me next to my school. But when I started with the high school, my interest switched to bass guitar, and I switched and mm, abruptly like got a violin and just start from there. And within a year, I started at the conservatory. Um, I didn't have the right papers. I didn't finish my high school because I left earlier, and I actually started earlier at the conservatory. Um, and I've been studying there 3, 4 years. During that time, a lot of jazz um, education, but at the same time, also a lot of playing a lot of metal. Um, I was really into heavy music, which brought me starting with Pestilence back then. The Spears album. It was really like a very progressive way of thinking, and I think that was a big thing in starting with bass guitar, like progressive minded, like that was very much there. Later on, I ended up like also in flamenco ensembles, playing very much like kind of world music, jazz, fusion, um, but still, like yeah, most known probably for the work that I did with Pestilence and Obscura later.
And what keeps you guys? I mean, fretless. I think most people try fretless, or think they want to play fretless, and then realize it's a whole other beast. You know what I mean? I had a student that started bringing fretless to lessons, and I made him just play a G major scale, like with a drone in the back, so he could hear how out of tune he was, and he stopped bringing it. So, so like, what was there a hump for you guys, or you're just single minded? You just decided that fretless was for you. Is it the tone? Is it the expression? What keeps you with it?
I guess going back to the first answer of being trained classically, I'm pretty sure neither one of us really shied away from the, you know, intonating yourself kind of thing. That was never too daunting. And it's actually always a process. And that's what I tell young people. I don't have students like you, but similarly, if someone says about the tuning, I say, hey, it's an ongoing thing. I mean, because you could really put in so many hours on an instrument and learn where those sweet spots are. And as soon as you play a different fretless bass guitar, you're going to make small adjustments because it's just built differently. So I wouldn't ever promote the fear of intonating to anyone young or starting on a fretless because, I think most classical musicians agree that it's always an ongoing thing and you're always, adjusting yourself. But as far as sticking with the instrument, I believe it's just, yeah, having said all that about the intonation versus frets, I think the fretted versus fretless thing is not a big difference that everyone thinks it is. It's still a bass guitar, and playing a lot of metal, you can adjust. You can use these steel round wound strings. You could play with a bright tone. You could even dump a little overdrive on there and play aggressively. And it would be so convincing that it's not a fretless if you need it to be. It's that close. Yeah, I think the fretless does, however, have a sense of advantage for expressing. It has a little more of a human quality, like the voice can flow softly between notes, and I think the fretless just gives us that little edge in kind of a colorful expression. But yeah, like I said, you could lay off of that style and just play really, precise attack notes and blend in as a, normal bass or whatever. But I don't know. It's something that we're both very attracted to, and our playing styles are different but mesh together. And so, yeah, this album's a big achievement for us to imagine two fretless players together. It would actually turn out to be possible.
Yeah, um, I think yeah, it's very true. I think also that fretless is not something to be, like I know it's a step if you play bass guitar and you're trying to develop on the instrument, to figure out how to play things or different techniques. But the cool thing with fretless is I literally put all my fretted basses away. I put them in a locker, and I only kept one fretless six-string Warwick thumb bass at that time.
Mhm.
And I purely wanted to focus on that thing because otherwise I thought like I cannot make that step. I really have to dive into that. And that was because of playing flamenco. And flamenco can sound like this very Moorish sound, which means that you have some, accentuation and it's more like a little bit, like free. And that was actually also one of those things, apart from classical background, that is so attractive about a fretless bass. Instead of being scared of playing without frets, it's just very interesting actually to dive into it and to trust your ears, and to try to develop like, okay. So it's, yeah, I think it's also, yeah, looking at Steve, it's also from our classical background and also the interest in world music, Arabic music, Moorish music, like it's an
Hmm.
interesting, it's a very interesting thing, fretless.
Well, that kind of brings me to another point. I was trying to, I was looking at all the song titles from the album Tetradōm, and I had read that you guys kind of were sending each other little bits of world music or little different kind of ideas from other cultures. Is that? And then when I was looking through the song titles, and it seems like they're all kind of like mythological or other cultural places. Is that kind of the basis of the album, like the musical direction you're on?
Yeah, this is actually what we had in mind like about 16, 17 years ago. Steve and I were often, we were often hanging like when we were touring country where we stayed. So we always tried to find each other and talk a little bit. But we had this idea for quite a while that like it would be so nice, we had this friendship, but it would be so nice if we could maybe do something together, like build a group, but how? And it was very fuzzy in the beginning. We didn't have really a clear idea about it. It took a lot of time, but we came back on that every time again. Like, dude, it would be really interesting, to find a way to get these bases together. And I think, yeah, we had many conversations, right, Steve?
Yeah, it was a big mystery how we were going to do it and what it would even sound like. We knew in theory that we wanted to combine all of our learned background and everything that inspires us and melt that together. And you could see that Jeroen played in a lot of flamenco style and world ensemble, and I had my head into the real hard fusion world, and we're both from a metal background, so we wanted to meld all this stuff because that's what we specialized in. That was our experience getting there. And so writing instrumental music, songs without lyrics, you have a different vibe and a different theme of what they're about. And so I think some of the song titles came from mystical places and things that are kind of an, you know, ethnic projection, like an escape or something just cool that's mysterious. Um, some of the song titles were also offered by Eve, who was the main composer of a lot of these songs. So some of the working titles in the original state made it to the final round, and that's what the song was always called. Some of them had working titles that needed to be changed to match the theme of the album, but it's a mixture. It's mythological, it's oriental, it's ethnic, it's spiritual. I mean, it's whatever kind of vibe hit us as the song was growing, the way we identified with it. Um, and a lot of these songs did come together from these bits and pieces that were in older folders that were brought in from Arabic scales and Moorish music and world music and stuff. But that's not the only ingredient. There's one song on there where Jeroen found this death metal song that's just a crazy swirl of chaos death metal, and he sent it to Eve and said, "What do you think of this? Cacophony, and do you think we could have a Quadvium song that fits this?" And so yeah, so some of the songs seeds were planted in a desert, and some of them came right from the death metal world. So it's a big mixture of all that stuff that we represent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome to have. It's like a dual self portrait or something like that. That you guys, it's both you guys on there. When you're tracking and recording, I mean, since Fretless has such an expressive sound, I was thinking about are you, when you're tracking this stuff, are you thinking about trying to match vibratos, or are you adjusting your tone to fit in with each other, or is it you just play and that's just how it goes? That's how it worked. Because it
No,
sounds
actually,
awesome.
yeah, no, actually, that was something very natural. We based on the most of the compositions come from Eve. We threw in a lot of rough sketches, but he was able to create full songs for us where we could, like trying to play around with the arrangements, and many of them were already. So we have tried to separate the basses, just like arrangement wise, but then what we found out when we were tracking bass here is that Steve brought his brand new signature bass, his Ibanez SDG B1, that he brought here. So he brought two, and we picked one for recording. And then, as soon as he started tracking, and we combined it with my bass tracks, and you heard basically, yes, it felt also very much natural together, right, Steve?
Yeah, it was crazy. We kind of had this brief pre-notion that we would have to plan, like you said, like all these vibratos and slides and, you know, this big concerted orchestration to stay off each other's toes. But once we started playing together, it was so weird how it came together naturally. Um, we have this weird balance of similarities and differences. And the 50-50 combination of that between us both, it just seemed to interlock. It was surprisingly a lot easier than we thought. We were ready to just see what happened, jump in there and deal with the mess. But man, after the first day, we had recorded till like 3 in the morning, and I was walking back to the hotel, and already I get a rough mix from Jeroen. He's like, dude, check it out. It sounds so cool together. It's like we didn't have to really scoop out either of our tones to blend them. We just had this weird magical merging, it was like, wow, okay, cool. So we were surprised and we just went with it, and the whole thing was going like this. But that should not overshadow the fact that that's mainly speaking of tone and little inflection stuff. The compositions did take a long time, and the the way we got the basses to interact, either to call and answer, or play harmoniously, or play octaves, or even clash intentionally, that took a long time. And most of that work, Jeroen was diving into the lab before I flew to Amsterdam to record with him. So a lot of the credit of the of the weaving the bass lines together goes to Jeroen, but there was holes there and stuff that he didn't finish that he allowed me to kind of, you know, finish up a couple, holes that he had, and put my work in there, and just basically playing together, sitting side by side. It was yeah, like I said, like pleasantly surprising how well it did work together. So we were fortunate in that regard, that we possess enough differences where they work together, but also similarities where we can play the same thing, without a lot of adjustment on either of our half.
But I think we have been also very lucky with, let's say, the the sound character of both instruments. Um, like I think if you would have two Warwick thumb basses or two Ibanez basses, like they could have easily clashed. You deal with the same sound. I think this is the beautiful thing of like, besides the compositions and the production and everything, we're super happy with. That the only thing is that we've been very lucky with this blend, that the basses kind of melt together, and the way they kind of, they have like question answers. There's like super, like the unisono playing, very massive sound. I kind of say, yeah, it's the sound character of the instruments and our signature playing that comes all together. And I think, yeah, that was something that we couldn't foresee, like how is this going to sound? It was
Yeah.
just something that turned out like this.
Yeah, I think
Yeah. That is
Also,
awesome.
to expand, hold on one second, to expand on what he said about our playing styles, I think when a lot of bass players imagine two bass players playing together, they just picture this huge, boomy, low end overdose. And the cool thing about me and Jeroen's playing styles is we're very attack heavy. We play very articulate in our own sound spectrums, but neither of us have this really mammoth woofy sound. We're both playing of up in the mid range and not afraid of the high end. So I think I think we complement the low end half and half instead of double. I think we avoided the woofiness by this kind of characteristic playing style. So yeah, because a lot of bass players are asking me like, "Oh, how are you going to make room for that?" It's like it happened easy. We both hit pretty fucking hard.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I did want to ask you, and how do you see each other's playing as different? Like, what do you admire about each other's playing? Like, Jeroen, when you're listening to Steve, what are the characteristics that you think kind of complement your style?
Oh wow, this like Steve opened my ears a long time ago. Like I remember that I bought, I think it was Human, and so we were still pretty young, and it was Human, and I played that album in the car of my mom, and I was blown away. It's like this is really, this is like, so I've been always a huge fan of Steve's signature style. Yeah, back then mostly metal. You could always hear that. That's that's Lord Fretless.
For me, I think Jeroen is yeah, I'm a couple years older than him, and so maybe by that factor just like that much ahead of him. So I was going out into the darkness trying to find a way to express this instrument in a brutal, extreme context. And it, it's always, it's still something I'm working on. But when I heard Jeroen's playing, I knew this kid was onto that same wavelength I was, like a, a desire to reach above and a desire to be different. So I was always a fan of his. But when the Cosmogenesis album came out of Obscura, this is all those qualities at a very hyperspeed level. I mean, there is not one simple thing going on that whole album. I mean, everybody is technically pushed to the limit, and yet here's this bass finding its way to bounce up on top and create these, you know, like a lot of bass players like to pop octaves, and you know, it gives them a sense of movement, but it's safe because it's technically the same note. And here your room's he's popping these ninths and these the octave of the major third and stuff. And I'm like, what are these strange intervals? And then when you get down and learn it, which I had to do, unfortunately, you realize that it's just a different coloring of the same kind of playing. But like I said, he was doing it at such a high speed. It was so awesome, man, that anyone could pull that off. I mean, he basically started a whole genre over there in Europe. There's so many bands that you know have glommed onto this obscura necrophagus stuff and emulate that style. And maybe some of it comes from the early death stuff. That might be the granddaddy of it. But as evolution happens, things improve, and you got to be on the cutting edge to improve. So yeah, that's what I heard. I heard a lot of new stuff going on, and I was always a big admirer.
Thank you.
I'll send the
Yeah.
PayPal later, brother.
So,
Don't worry.
yeah. You need an invoice for that, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of cutting edge and stuff, I mean, you like you just mentioned, you both are trendsetters in the fretless world, and it seems to me like in the past decade or so that there have been a lot more fretless players in metal. Have you noticed that? Are you
Big
meeting
time.
these guys? Are you mentoring any these people? Yeah. Can you talk about that, Steve?
Yeah, there's a lot more finally, and that is so awesome. It's good to have that company. For for such a long time, almost a 20-year period, um, starting around the mid 90s, I guess. I don't know the exact period, but metal was compromising the low end, and bass players were getting really pushed to the background and becoming, non-existent, and the bass player jokes were flourishing, and this whole hierarchy thing was going on, and it really at the detriment to enjoying the music. Um, I always like to say it's called heavy metal, and bass makes music heavy. It's whether you double the guitar line, that low end is going to make the guitar riff heavier. And if you're really syncopating and matching the drum rhythms, well, there you go. You're making those drum hits melodiously heavy. You're giving musical value to this freaking noise. No, I love my drummers, but yeah. So it was for a long time. It was a fight, to give relevance to this instrument that we love, and it would have been easy to give up if it weren't for the small voices here and there that were encouraging and pushing, like, hey, we really like this sound and we really like what you're doing. It's like, okay, cool. It's worth it. But out of this struggle, I think came this new wave. Not necessarily a wave, but like this generation, like you said, in the last 10 years, has been a lot of new young technical bass players. They're going fretless, they're going multi-string, they're tapping up a storm, they're doing the triple thumb slap. There's all these tricks coming out that me and Jeroen can't do, but it's awesome to see. I love to see the the growth of the instrument, and I love to see these bass players enjoying it, and I love to see their bands embracing that style and bringing the bass back into importance. I'm really thankful I lived long enough to see it come back around, because guys like Bob Daisley and Steve Harris and stuff like that, they had no idea that all their work would have been, pushed under the rug for so long, but now it's coming back little by little. I think technology is helping with that too. These guys that thought they'd take the easy way out, mixing albums, just doing guitar and drums. I think now plugins and compressors are allowing bass to be a little more tameable. So yeah, I think that's part of it too. It's getting out there a little better.
Well, yeah, I think it's great times in that sense that like the bass guitar has developed so like crazy, like all the styles and all the ways the instrument got like feet on the ground, and the expressions on the instrument were so different. Like that's what I like very much about bass guitar. But yeah, now these days, yeah, fretless is also a thing in metal, but um, it took some time, and I think it's great that you see bands who give their bass player the environment, like the musical environment, the capability to the opportunity to get a little bit more in a mix, or like musically like involved differently, which is very positive. It's I think it's something that developed, and of course metal became also got very technical. Um, it's very actually very interesting to see how bass guitar developed in metal music, where that same goes for fusion or jazz, like. But in metal it has been very interesting, but it has been a long way before we got really more audible in a mix.
Yeah.
That was something that, funny enough, it used to be there in the 70s, 80s, and then everything got the production became more compressed. Bass guitar was less audible, less dynamic, and I think now you have more and more bands who see that and also like that more like analog sound, like a little bit more warmer sound, like not too much compressed. And that gives also a lot of space for bass guitar, to somehow get better in a mix.
Do you just getting geeky when you're that's recording style? Do you have Do you get geeky about engineering and making frequencies that make your fretless pop out? What do you guys think about that kind of stuff, or do you have any tips, Steve?
Well, I was going to say this is Jeroen could really speak on this. He kind of took the reins. Like I said, I had gone to Amsterdam and set up in his place, so he that was his home field there. But I learned a lot of new things. The first time I recorded in stereo. Now both basses are in stereo, splitting the stereo field. It's a pretty complex thing. I think JP can speak more to that than me.
Yeah, we try to record the basses as dynamic as possible. So not making huge decisions, dialing in too much EQ. First we recorded like every bass has like left right channel and one dry channel, which is great. It works great for both instruments in this case, to still keep the punch in the middle, but you also have a little bit stereo field. So these basses also in the stereo field, they overlap partly, but they're also clearly left and right oriented. So that's what we wanted to try. So to have a very broad sound, and I felt like it wouldn't be natural if I go stereo, Steve stays mono, like you don't want that. So I think it worked very well. It's just not super extreme, but this also comes a little bit from this, like Carlos Benavent style, the stereo sound, but also the good articulation on the instrument. Like that's what we wanted to make sure that the articulation in all the details would come out really well. So that's why we try to track it in a very natural way.
I think that definitely happened because you can hear everything both you guys are doing, even when it sounds like a really dense, soundscape, it's still clear what's going on, and it's just so cool. You can hear both of your melodies going on at the same time, and it's really, really awesome.
Yeah, Eve did a great job. She did a great job. She mixed it, and she was really like, from the very beginning, she could visualize what we had in mind. So we have been extremely lucky with Yuma as well, with Eve, working as a quartet and creating this together.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Eve too, I wanted to touch on. I was just looking through the Quadvium Instagram, and it was talking about the different time signatures that are in
Yeah.
across the album, which I hadn't even picked up on because it just grooves like the whole time. It's just going along, And then I'm looking at this like, oh shit, it's 15. What? What? So was that part of Eve's composition, or is that part of your composition? And is that how natural are odd time signatures for you guys?
So yeah, by nature of this music, we embrace the technical aspect, and in technical music, it's fun to play around with time changes, either deliberately odd time or sometimes playing across the odd time, creating the polyrhythms and stuff. And we do all that on this album. But I think the complexity comes from I don't know better, with the genius of Eve's brain, because some of these time signatures I never even heard before. I didn't know that you could have a 30-second measure until me and Jeroen are we got the Cubase open, and we got the click track on, and we're trying to record our basses, and all of a sudden the metronome hits this 30-second bar, and it's more like a vibration. It's just like, and you can't groove to that. So a lot of times we figured out, just mute the damn click track and just play by phrasing, and then if the timing sounds off, we'd adjust it in real time. But yeah, some of the time signatures on the album it's the first time me and JP have seen stuff so algebraically crazy. And that comes from Eve's mind. But yeah, I wanted Jeroen to talk about that because, he's got the brain to understand it. He dove into the music before I got there, and he's just like, dude, like, oh man, wait till you see this.
That's crazy. That's really, but it's created. That's actually very true what you say, Kevin. That if you listen to the music and you do not really count, but it feels pretty accessible. Once you open the tab book, you will, and basically listening to this video of Yuma.
Yeah.
There's crazy changes, and this is one of the challenging things playing this stuff. But it's also, like to put things right there with that accent, so it makes sense. It's a very specific thing, and what you also do with it is that you create very different atmospheres,
Yeah.
which is a cool thing.
Yeah, like you, Kevin, we heard these songs in demo mode and they sounded great and it appealed to us and we were ready to jump in. And it did. It had a groove to it, had phrasing, and nothing was alarming until we saw that grid and heard the click track of it. And then we realized what the little microscopic ingredients were doing in there. And we were like, oh my God, this is crazy. But from the very beginning, even our scrutiny during the arrangement process, we didn't pick up on all that stuff, until we opened up the session. And then, wow. So the final product kind of reflects that too. We got through the hard part and got our parts done. But once it come together, it kind of goes back to the demo phase. It's like people don't, that those 13 bars, those 17 bars, all these odd, they don't scream at you like, hey, look at me, I'm a stupid odd number. It just flows, in the phrasing context. So, credit to Eve as well, even though she's got this evil genius, how to hook all this weird stuff together. In the end, it's art and it's very awesome to listen to, so yeah, it was also something we had to discover, but you're right. It smooths out once we all get a hold of it.
It's funny that you guys would have the same reaction as me because I was just listening and then, oh God,
Yeah.
One thing I also liked about the album is that there's like kind of a bookend, and I'm not sure how, it kind of starts with Eve's guitar and this kind of like open reverby kind of thing, and then the whole album ends with this like just solo bass, just very kind of deep, like spiritual kind of like simple melody.
Right.
Was that? I'm just wondering if that was like part of the whole plan, or it just worked out that way. Because it just felt like such an epic ending to the album.
That was something we didn't want to redo. So how the melody, the solo at the very end of the album is played by Eve.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and we wanted to mention that as well in the album, but it was so beautiful played that we thought like, why would we replace this? Who are we to do that? Like it's so beautiful that she kind of starts the album with guitar and also ends in this kind of feedbacky trip. In the end, it's it would have been a shame, to throw it to
Yeah, I had all the song files and I put them in a playlist and I would just listen to it on repeat all the time and I would adjust the order to how it felt like a proper a book going from chapter to chapter and had a good flow. And when we decided to start the album with Moksha, which was a nice melodic, bring you in slowly and kind of introduce you to the band instead of hitting you, right off the bat, it seemed like, and thanks for noticing, by the way, that's really awesome. You picked up on that because the end of Eidolon, as Jeroen said, is Eve playing a bass passage. And we thought, how beautifully ironic that here's this album that highlights these two crazy bass players that's full of bass playing stuff going back and forth. And the very last thing we send you out on is the third bass player, is Eve playing the farewell solo. So yeah, it was really nice. And if you put your playlist on repeat, when that bass solo ends of Eve, it starts again with his guitar coming on, and it makes a nice little circle. And yeah, you could just listen to the album all day, and the play counts will go up and the streaming will go up, and I really encourage this.
Man, I just thought that was such a nice touch.
Cool.
Well, that's a lot of the questions I had about the album, except I do want to know, is there going to be more Quadvium? Because it's just too cool to let it go. So I'm asking, but also asking, please,
Yeah, I think we will we'll have to continue with this. No, it turned out we are very happy, and I would love to, after this period of promotion, and I would love to start again with a fresh, with a fresh mind, and start with rough ideas. And I hope we get a chance to release a second album by that time.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kevin. It was the history in the making of this album goes back, like Jeroen said, probably in the early 2000s when we started hanging out, seriously discussing it, and the whole journey of what it's going to be, what it's going to sound like, finding these musicians to help us, the compositions, the mix, everything was such, there's enormous tasks to complete. Yeah, you're right. To just end it on one album would be sad, because we really enjoyed, watching it grow. As painstaking as it was, we watched it grow, and now it's out to the public and people are able to share in this journey. And a thing we realized also along the way is me and Jeroen have an awesome chemistry together, whether we're playing bass or we're just hanging out, going to bars or restaurants or whatever. So I don't think there's a possible chance in hell that we're going to not do something together. And having Yuma and Eve with us makes 100% logic. These guys totally complement our vision. And yeah, I mean, it's a back burner band. Everybody's really busy with their main thing, and this is kind of a niche project, but it turned out very well, and we're really, really proud of it. So yeah, we'd like to see what else we can come up with for sure. So I'm pretty sure you'll hear some new music from the band.
Outstanding. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I love the album. I'm really happy to share with everybody, because I've just been having it on repeat since I got it. So
Right on.
Thank you
That's
so
great
much,
news.
Kevin. We really appreciate it.